And we are back with another outstanding episode of the Square Table Degenerates. Today we are joined by actor / musician, Mr. Jeremy Swift. How are you today, sir?
I'm not bad. Yeah. A little bit tired from doing a bit of cleaning up, but raring to go.
I feel it, man. I feel it. So the internet tells me you were born in Stockton-on-Tees in the north of England. Now, I had to look up this town because it turns out it's not just on the Tees River, and the name of the town has nothing to do with golf. And it says it's this made me laugh. It says it's known for the northernmost finding of a hippo. Now, to start out, are you a golfer? Are you a golfer yourself? And when was the last time you saw a hippo in real life?
That I saw a hippo in real life? I don't think I have, unless it was in a zoo. But my wife went whitewater rafting about 20 years ago, and she was charged by a hippo. And they are one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. So her and her buddies just had to row like crazy to get away from this hippo.
Where was she? Where was this in Africa somewhere? Was she?
It was in Africa. Yeah, it was in South Africa. But Stockton is known really for the first railway line, the Stockton to Darlington railway line. Made by with the steam engine made by the Stevenson brothers. And ironically, the last time I went to Stockton Station, it wasn't there. There isn't a railway station. It's not even a history museum. There's nothing there at all.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I went to because when I went over there to the UK, everybody's like, "Oh, you got to take trains." And it was like in October, and like I'm not gonna lie, the trains. I mean, they were convenient if it, like the spot you're going to was like the next spot right there, but like. Man, I had to go from Liverpool to Worcester, and I had to get on like 3-4 different trains and carry these back. And it's like your connector, the way they got it over there. I mean, and that's not all stations, but a lot of stations they'll have like the main track, and you'll be on this side, and like your next train is boarding at track 3. So you got to carry all these bags up the steps all the way over.
Yeah, it's bad, particularly on the northwest coast. The railway line there is, it's been debated in the House of Commons. It is terrible. But there is a great train journey from London up to Edinburgh, really. And you at one point you go past like a cliff edge kind of and see crashing waves. It's really, really dramatic. It's fantastic.
Okay, I'll have to check. See, I didn't. To be fair, also I didn't really research the train schedules before I went there. Like I just kind of picked up and went. So I was like reliant because I didn't realize how far Wakefield was from like anything. Like there was because I had to my first like night and a half was like spent in Wakefield, and I was meeting my buddy up in Belfast. I had to catch a plane from Liverpool, so I had to get from Wakefield to Liverpool, and there's no train that goes there. I had to call in favors, and a friend of a friend took me for like 60 pounds. He just drove me over there. He gave me a player's price because that's probably a $300 Uber if I was to take it myself.
My goodness, yeah.
All right, now what was let's see here. What was life growing up for you? It says you come from a family of musicians. Now, were your parents entertainers?
No, they were teachers. They and they were music teachers. So in June, my dad taught in a secondary school for a bit. He was head of music and maths, and then my mum was head of music in her school. But they did lots of extracurricular activities like choirs, and amateur groups, Gilbert and Sullivan opera groups and stuff like that. That was, they used to have choir practices in our house when my sister and I were going to bed. So we would draw pictures of ourselves with our hands over our ears going, and just a bubble going, "Shut up," and stick it under the door, which was really, really grumpy of us, wasn't it? So I was brought up with lots of music, and also my dad was into sort of electronics. He subscribed to 2 magazines, Practical Electronics and Practical Wireless, and he used to send away for kits that you could like make an oscillator out of. So you'd get these kits and we'd solder them together, transistors and capacitors and all resistors and all that kind of thing. Right. And then we'd make up some kind of strange noise from this thing, like that. I don't know if you know the Daleks from Doctor Who. We will examine that kind of. See, I could do it. I don't need a synthesizer. I could do it. But that effect was called a ring modulator, and we would do that and go, ooh. That's how I'd spend my Saturday afternoons as a kid. So he showed me how to make up tape loops and stuff like that, and so I was into the sort of the recorded world as well as just playing music, so that there was that dual interest going on.
Now, when you were coming up, were you into sports at all? I mean, seeing as you played in a soccer drama later in life, did you have like a favorite Premier League team? What was your team or anything like that?
I did not ever, because I was brought up in this family of nerds. Really, there was nobody I knew who was into sport. My dad, to be honest, was pretty overweight, so he never got picked for the sports team when he was at school. So it was always sports, a little bit grumpy about it. So no, I didn't. And when my agent said to me, "I'm putting you up for this show called Ted Lasso. It's about football," I just went, "Oh no, no. I'm not gonna." I just thought, I'm not gonna get that, because normally you do get jobs that you gravitate to that particular field. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been up for soap operas that I never watch, and I've been in some and I never watch them, and I think, what am I doing here? And I never last very long in them, however, yeah, I can appreciate, being a sort of like a music nerd and, crazy about certain singers and bands. I appreciate, the obsession that guys in particular can have about sports and about players, and so I get it completely. And I think something the show does show is that it's a game is a great drama, and you just do not know where it's going to go. That's full of excitement.
Well, sports, in my opinion, sports is like the last thing that's not scripted anymore. Like everything else is, movies are all predictable. All TV shows or reality shows are fake. All the way, sports is the last bastion of, we don't know what's going to happen. This is unpredictable. That's why I still like it. I failed as a father, in my opinion. Like my son doesn't give one crap about sports. He's into Pokemon and other stuff. I'm a Browns nut. I hype season tickets. I've had season tickets to the Cavs, Indians, and Browns. I love everything about sports. I breathe it. But yeah, my son, the rest, I think it's just because Cleveland's just been such a loser for so long. It's kind of like England in the Euros. Like we didn't win nothing in forever, and it's so toxic. I can't blame them. I mean.
Well, how old is he? 13. You said, Joe. He could well get there. And kids. Gosh, having two kids who are now, my daughter's coming up for 22 and my son's 19, coming up for 20. Gosh, they go through so many changes, and you quite often you forget what they did, and they'll say, "Do you remember when I was completely into Pokemon or whatever?" And they're like, "Oh my God, that was a year of obsession that you had with cards." And yeah.
Well, I got a 25-year-old. She's a stepdaughter, and I had her since she was 9. So like when she was a teenager, so like now she's got babies. Like how she grew, it's a totally different person. So that's why I don't give up. I never give up on your kids. They can always make their lives better. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Even later.
Absolutely. Yeah. And huge dramatic changes when it's basically when empathy kicks in. It's like, oh, thank God you understand. You think about other people. I've been waiting nearly 2 decades.
Now, what was your music like in high school? Were you still doing music in high school and drama club? What were your activities like in high school?
I did. Well, I started to in junior school, actually, I started to learn the guitar, and then in secondary school, I started having violin and piano lessons. And outside of school, there weren't really any drama classes. Gosh, I've got some friends who've got kids in a school at LA, and they do musicals that are really, really sort of professional looking when they're really young. We didn't have anything like that. But I started going to an art center. I joined an art center when I was 11, and I was the first member of it. My mum was really into, the performing arts, and we would go to the theater. I saw an opera when I was like 10, a modern Benjamin Britten opera. So we're well into all that kind of thing. So she took me to sign up for this arts center, and I was the first ever member of this brand new center, and I started going to improv drama. It wasn't comedy improv. It wasn't like I was, budding for SNL by the time I was 13. But we had a kind of facilitator teacher who would sort of, get us to do stuff. So I did that, and then when I left school at 16, I went to a technical college that specialized in drama. And one of the people who'd been there was Richard Griffiths, who's from my town, and he was in the first couple of Harry Potters. He was I can't remember his character's name, but he's a very big guy, and he was the cruel sort of stepdad of Harry Potter who kept him under the stairs. And so he was the big hero from my town because he was a really talented character actor, and I was excited the fact that he'd done this course that I did, and he went on to do this huge stuff.
That's it. You got started in movies, right? And then there was this movie I had forgotten about called Gosford Park. Now I checked a couple like clips because I ain't seen this movie in years. I honestly can't remember if I have seen it, but like I looked at the clips and there's so much like period stuff and fancy stuff in that movie. Like, is it hard to like not walk around and be clumsy and bump into stuff and knock over things while you're doing it? Are movies like that fun to film where you got to get all dressed up and you see all fancy stuff, or is it all just kind of like this is a lot of laborious bullshit? What's up with that?
Well, I'll tell you what was difficult about that was that I played a footman and I had to deliver drinks to people, and there was no from the camera team, there was no accommodation of the fact that when we crossed over a room, we had to cross a load of wires and cables that they put down, because Robert Altman, who directed that, he would always have two cameras on the go. So there was a lot of camera action and of course tracks. That's so I'd have to walk up with a tray of drinks and literally not trip up, but not just that. I had to look reasonably elegant. Hello, Paul Wright Lawns. So that was quite difficult. On stage, that's something else. We have a history in the UK of doing restoration comedy, and Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw, Shakespeare, of course. So we're used to working in these different periods of time and different crazy costumes that make your ass look enormous or whatever. Mine already does, incidentally. So that's quite a problem. But I love doing that film. That film and interestingly enough, Robert Altman is another great man from Kansas, as is Jason Sudeikis, of course. And I think the thing about his films is that they can be watched. If you haven't seen it, watch it and then watch it again a week later, because you'll go, wait a minute. He knows that, she knows that, there are scenes that will impact on you that do not impact on you the first time watching. He has real layers, to quote Donkey from Shrek.
You got to tell me about this movie, Fred Claus. Now, did you realize the insane amount of stars were going to be in this movie when you auditioned for it?
Gosh, I don't think I knew quite how. I knew Paul Giamatti was in it, but yes, I started to hear that, because that how many other people were involved in it. That was a weird film to do because I played an elf, and we had.
How tall are you playing an elf?
Well, I'm overqualified to play an elf. Probably I'm too tall. But what they did with several elves is that they put our heads in post-production on small people's bodies. So there was a bunch of small people who played a lot of the elves. They were all from Russia. I think they were all from one small town, actually. And the guy who was playing my body was called Alexei, and he didn't speak a word of English. And I had to try and get him because he was ostensibly a really bad actor, and he would do huge gestures, and sort of arms above his head, kind of thing. And I'd be sort of my head in my hands, and so I had to try and get through to a translator to ask him to calm it down a little bit. But he was always on his phone, which was almost as big as he was, and it was very difficult to get through to him. So I do apologize for my performance in that. I'm not entirely to blame.
That's great. No, but I get a question for the chat from Randy, but real quick, Ludacris had a song on that soundtrack called Ludacrismas. Now, have you ever met Ludacris? Have you ever heard this song? This song is kind of silly, to be honest with you. I'd never heard it before.
I have not heard it, but I had to because I didn't really have trailers at that point. I just had sort of little rooms. But there was one day when I had the trailer that Ludacris had the day before, and he uses some really very high brand perfume or aftershave. It was just like, this smells like stardom. This is what a top rapper smells like.
It's probably covering the weed smell, for being honest. You know how that goes. All right, now we all get a question from Randy. Do you like Texas barbecue?
I am a vegetarian, so I'm sorry, Randy. I don't even know what that is, but it probably is meaty, so I wouldn't be eating it. I haven't eaten meat for 43 years.
Yeah, if you haven't eaten meat for 43 years, don't start now because you'll get immensely sick.
I think, you know what? I accidentally ate it about 6-7 years after giving it up, and I was really, really sick because I think your metabolism and all the chemistry of your body completely changes. So no, I won't be. I won't be going back there ever. No.
All right, you were in some banger soap operas. Now I'm not gonna sit here and act like I've watched soap operas. I've seen the parodies, and I know of them, but like you were in EastEnders and Downton Abbey. These are pretty known. Do you get recognized from these roles or from Ted Lasso more?
Really, I get more recognized in the States, just generally speaking, than I do in the UK. People look at me in the UK. I see people looking at me in it, but unfortunately, it's the same face that would be aghast if you thought that was somebody who murdered your brother. So it's people are often looking at me with in slight disgust and shock, and then they realize as they're trying to work out who I am. But yeah, certainly much more from Ted Lasso. That's much more than Downton Abbey. Yeah.
Now, when you're filming soaps in the UK, like here in the States, they do it every day. They air soaps every day. Is it like that over there? Do you guys have soap operas every day? And do you like filming movies or TV better, or does that really matter?
I think it depends on the show, entirely on the show. Ted Lasso was an awful lot of fun to do because the script's changed. It's a thing that the comedy improv, SNL backstory with Jason, and so things would change. You get the script. The third season, I stopped learning the script in advance because it would change on the morning of the day you were shooting. As you were going in the car, it would change again from going from makeup to the set. And then it would change on the set. And sometimes it would change when the cameras were rolling. So, but I really, really love that because it really keeps you on your toes. Thank you, Art by Sparkle. The thing I like about, I've done films, sort of fantasy or kids films or whatever, and like Mary Poppins Returns and Jupiter Ascending. And I love the fact that you can walk onto a set and there are like 87 people there. You have to wonder what 80 of them are doing. But that is something else. When you have people who are just, in Mary Poppins Returns, I said, there was a kind of the house had to sort of quake, and I had to fall backwards, and I said, "Oh, can I catch something from this mantelpiece?" And they said, "Yeah, what do you want to catch?" And said, "Oh, a vase, a clock," and I had a bunch of people writing all this down, and then they put springs in the walls and stuff flew out, just because they could, and there was a big budget. I love doing crazy stuff like that. That's just enormous fun.
All right. Speaking of Ted Lasso, now I heard of it, but I really haven't seen it. I don't have Apple TV, so it's kind of one of those things I got to get around to. But the premise of the show, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is funny because this reminds me of an American movie called Major League in a little ways. But the jilted ex-wife gives a Premier League coaching job to Jason Sudeikis, who is a college football coach here in the States. He's coaching like Auburn or some shit. And so he puts him at coach over there of the, Premier League team, the overseas football, as we call it. And so the team would fail, but then they start bonding and stuff like that. Is that kind of right? Is that the premise of the show pretty much?
That is the premise of the first season, certainly. And then, it develops hugely from there. That is the narrative, the script premise, but ostensibly the show is about mentorship, friendship, bad fathers, divorce, and throughout all that, the comedy is completely on point. But it sort of threads through these themes of panic attacks and mental health, and that's how we got to go to the White House. That was the premise for that, really, to talk about it, because that's one of the big themes of the show. And Joey, go and get Apple TV. After this interview, for goodness sake, because you're a sports fiend, you will love it. And having said that, you don't have to be into sports to get into the show, because ostensibly it's about a community, a bunch of people, and from different levels, and how they interact with each other. And it's it's such a privilege to have been in that show. It's really, really awesome.
Now you play the director of football operations, which is the equivalent of like an NFL GM. Now, do you think that we will ever, between the UK and the US, we're sister countries. We're best friends, really. We got to admit that. I mean, there was a couple skirmishes here or there, but families fight. But do you think we'll ever get over this? We call football, you guys call it soccer thing. I'm never gonna not call NFL football not football. You know what I mean? But I can't call soccer football, because it just gets confusing, because that's all we talk about is football here. So it's like, do you think we'll ever get over this as a family? What do you think?
I don't know whether it matters an awful lot, to be honest. I think that we had the word football first, but when I was a kid, I think I remember it being called soccer, and that in the sort of late 60s, early 70s. Here it did have a sort of dual title, but who I don't really care.
Right. End of the day, it's just sports, right? All right, we got a standard question we ask here: Beatles or Queen? Who would you pick out of those two bands?
Oh, Beatles. Yeah. I only really like Queen's first two albums, which I like a lot, and then it became a little, wasn't my thing after that. Yeah.
It says, I'm a Brit. If Downton Abbey was on the same time as Match of the Day, the divorce rate would be unprecedented. That's great. Mix my dude. He's a guy up in Wakefield I go visit. He's awesome, man. That's
cool. Yeah.
All right. Now, does Jason Sudeikis and the crew, are you guys not laughing all the time? How hard is it to keep a straight face with some of those guys? Because, Sudeikis is working on SNL, a lot of improv stuff. He's got to be a prankster, right? Are you guys when they're not filming, you guys just constantly laughing? What's up with that?
Yeah, sometimes he's into doing it, but not always. Sometimes he recognizes that because he's a team player, so he there is stuff to be done, and he knows, as I've said earlier, that the script has changed. That can be something to get your head round, particularly if you've suddenly got a much longer speech and you've had to learn it in like 12 minutes. So he's a team player on that score, but yeah, I would say him and Brendan Hunt, who they're all buddies. and they both set the bar really high at comedy improv, and that is really, really hard to deal with when they come out with stuff. So that, yeah, again, it's a lot of fun. It's not all the time because we work hard and there's a lot of finessing to do. And sometimes, well, when you do see it, which hopefully is tonight, Joe.
I'm going to download that and get it. I have to figure out. Hopefully, there's a free trial because I don't know if I'm going to keep Apple TV for the whole time, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, well you'll binge watch it in a week or something. But there are locker room scenes where sometimes there may be like 14 people who have a line, and those scenes, which might be only 2 pages, they can take like 6 hours to do because of the coverage. So, but I think as well as having fun, laugh wise, we have a sort of winning sense of fun to get through those scenes. And keep your energy up, because you want to make the stuff work. You want the scene to work. So yeah,
that's awesome. All right, now let's talk about some of you're going into music. Did you have you always just wanted? I mean, you obviously were a musician by trade, pretty much. It sounds like. You got an album coming out? It's your second album. What was your first album called?
Oh my God, I've just suddenly forgotten. Oh my God. It's partly because some of my mates have taken the mickey out of me so much. They called it mournful hilarity. I've called I called it Everything's a Joke, which there is a title track to that. My second album is called Songs of Escape and Endless Night. And basically, it's kind of inevitably my kind of lockdown album, because when I sat down and thought about the songs that were eventually going to end up on the album, they were all about escaping or looking into oblivion, basically, because that's what we all did. 2 years ago, we were all stuck indoors and we wanted to be anywhere but where we were, and we thought about death a lot. Having said that, the album is not a kind of Leonard Cohen misery fest. Not that that's what Leonard Cohen was. He was a genius, but you know what I mean? It's not, oh, another downer track, please help me. It's a lot of multi-textured pop, and there's a lot of different vibes going on it. Yeah. But I've been I used to be in bands when I was younger. Keeping bands together was difficult with because I was trying to get doing a gig and then in a pub with 17 people, and then my agent would say, but I've got you this job where you can go on a tour to Japan or whatever it is, so I'd have to quit the bands basically. So but now, because of tech, I could do it myself. I'd much rather play with other people, but just for expediency and getting music together when I'm not working, that's what I do now.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'd much rather like have people. Our show, we usually have 4 guys, but everybody's got jobs. One guy had a kid. I'd much rather have people in the studio. I'd much rather fly you into Cleveland. Hey, come in the studio, but we got real world constraints we got to work with. Everybody's got families, and keeping 4 people together on a project that isn't like, it's different if like Will Smith came up like, oh, I need 4 guys. You're going to be successful immediately. But like if you got 4 guys who are trying to keep that same vision, trying to keep the same schedule, trying to keep, it's next to impossible over, besides maybe a couple months special projects. It's insane, man.
Yeah, really, really hard. And when I was doing it, really, because I'm so ancient, this was like pre-mobile phone. So, it's like, where's Tony, the bass player? Did you tell him to, it's like Spinal Tap, did you tell him? I think I told him, it's like, oh God. And he lives 8 miles away or something. It's, so, oh.
We got a question from my brother Mick. He says, best and worst location you have filmed and why?
Oh, that's a very good question. Best location, and you're gonna have to let me my brain, let me think about that. Oh my goodness. I think the worst location, there was a studio. I did a show called The Smoking Room, and I was on this, and the idea of the show This was about 18 years ago, and it was one of the first shows that was just in one room, and basically different people came in and out to have a cigarette, and because of that, they had to shoot the crap out of it, which means that they had to use every angle, a deep two shot, a wide shot, a track shot, and you were there from 8 in the morning till 7 at night on the same set every day, and it drove everybody, insane, completely insane. I'm trying to think of a nice place that I've been. I think, I did a film about 10 years ago. It was really, really tough because it was independent and was just 4 of us really in it. And it was really low budget, and we just stayed in terrible bed and breakfast places. But we had, the idea was, and it's pretty much the best film I've ever been in. It's called Downhill. There are a lot of films called Downhill, but this one is the best. And it's about going across. It was it's like the neck of England, basically. It's called the Coast to Coast Walk, and a lot of people do it for charity. A lot of guys, and this was a bunch of guys, and the idea was that they get drunk, they fall out, they get back together again, they tell each other some hard truths. But during that, we had to walk through. Did you ever get to the Lake District when you were in the UK, Joe?
Don't think so, no.
No, the Lake District is like it's so paradisical. It has incredible lakes, and it's enormously beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. So walking through that, Michty, was the best location I have ever been on, and also just going through deep, deep countryside, which you don't get to do on a day-to-day basis. That was fabulous.
All right, Sparkle really likes Downton Abbey. So what was a highlight? Do you have any highlights or any fun times that stick out for you on Downton Abbey?
It's Downton Abbey. There is
Downton Abbey, sorry. Yeah,
there's no W art by Sparkle. Speakle. I think being invited to play Bananagram by Maggie Smith and Penelope Wilton, that was very, very sweet. And also, there were some great scenes. There was a scene where my character Sprat had to complain about laundry and have a real tantrum, basically. And whilst I was doing it, I could see Maggie and Penelope laughing. So that was a real sort of privilege to make them laugh. That was delightful.
All right, now this just randomly occurred to me, this thought, but like you've played a butler kind of character-ish on a couple of shows. Have you ever met Michael Caine? And if, in a couple of years when you start, graying out and looking like that, would you be opposed to taking the new Batman role? If they're like, yo, we need you for the Batman, you need to be the butler. What do you think?
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there've been some good butlers in the Batman movies, haven't there? Michael Caine, yeah. I think I might be a bit young for Alfred, but
yeah, this is 20, 30 years from now when you're just looking at roles.
Oh, yeah. I would, I love the Batman movies, all the different ones there have been. So yeah, I would be totally up for that. I have played, I think, 4 butlers, a butler in The Durrells and in a movie called Amazing Grace about 20 years ago. Yeah, I've done my fair share of butling.
That's awesome. Well, Jeremy, thanks for coming out, brother. The new single drops July 28th. It's called Can't Stop Doing It. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the 24th, actually. But to be honest, you can listen to it now because it's on the album. Songs of Escape and Endless Night, which is on all the platforms. And if you haven't got any of the platforms, it's also on YouTube. But please have a listen. I'm very, very pleased with the album. I've been working on it. I was working on it for about 2.5 years on and off through doing Ted Lasso and the pandemic, and I'm really, really pleased with it.
Outstanding. So I'm going to go download Apple TV, check out some Ted Lasso, get back to you, and they'll let you know. From everything I've seen, man, it was winning, like, I saw some Academy, there's some awards, right? Wasn't there some nominations or something? What was up with the...
Correct. Yeah. Well, it has been nominated a lot for Emmys before. I think 20 the last 2 years, and this year it's 21.
Crazy.
It's cray.
Heck yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for coming out. Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern. Constantine Marolis from American Idol is going to be on. And Jeremy, appreciate you coming out. We'll talk to you later, bud.
Thank you, Joe. You take care, man.
All right, you too, man.